So I like to start these with a bit of an intro so people have a chance to join, because I know you get the notifications. So, Dr. Paul Palmer, been in the pharmaceutical industry now 4 decades. 4 decades this month. And I was going to celebrate by giving something away for free, or big discounts or something, but I never actually got there to make the offer on time, 14th of July, which brings us to today's presentation, really. On time, on budget, on spec, the pharmaceutical triple constraint. You see, the reason I didn't get the offer there on time was because the spec was wrong. Specification for the website, and it's currently going through a rework, which then of course is taking it over budget, and it's being delivered late. So it's quite topical that I had this 13 days ago, that I wasn't actually ready, which is a real shame, because I wanted to go off with a big boom and share with everybody the opportunity to work with me at a discounted rate, just because it was 40 years. So if you are really interested in working with me at a discounted rate, tell me about this video. Tell me what you like about this presentation, what your favorite part is, and I'll give you a discount. Just like that. But you have to tell me personally. And actually, while you're at it, if you really, really like the content that I present and share with everybody, make it public. Put it in the recommendations, not just a message. And I'll double the discount for the training, whatever training you choose. That's what we offer. Okay, so that's today's offer for you. It's Paul Palmer. I'm the founder of the Academy of Pharmaceutical Excellence, the founder, Pharma Quality Services Limited, founder, Paul R. Palmer Limited. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry now for 40 years. And over those 40 years, I've been a QP 22 years named on a license, releasing batches, and I still release batches. 22 years auditing. Actually, that's not quite true. I've been longer auditing than I've been a QP. I started back in 97. So is that 29 years? Yeah, 29 years supplier auditing. I had a couple of QPs that used to work directly for me, reporting into me. But I was already auditing back then. That was devices, pharmaceutical products, sterile, non-sterile. Yeah, interesting. Interesting for me. Probably not so interested in for you when you're expecting on time, on budget, on spec. Rethinking the pharmaceutical triple constraint that we all work to. Or should I say, we're all aware of. We don't necessarily all work to it. Because most projects are judged on the time, cost, and scope. But it's not everything. What about the specification? What about compliance? I remember supporting a company, now we're going back a long way, 2002, 2003, somewhere out there, approximately. And they couldn't work out how to fulfill an order for sterile vials of an injectable product because there was an error on the label. So I identified a partner that could work with us to do the rework without affecting the product inside. I went out and audited that partner. I wrote the report off, of course, But to be honest, I'd already done the assessment beforehand, and I knew their capabilities. And we then put the commercial agreement in place. They fulfilled the order. They reworked the product. And we managed to, I won't say recover because we didn't lose it, but we retained the 70,000 a month order from the NHS. And we didn't have to pay the penalty fees. And we continued selling. So it was a great success. We didn't have to pay the rejects, that was the other thing. Forgot about that. Didn't have to pay for the destruction of the waste. All the stock that we had. I think in the first year we saved 1.5 million. Something like that. Every project, not every project can meet its milestone. When it fails to meet GMP requirements, if you don't think about compliance when you start your project, if you don't include it in the considerations, then you're going to struggle. I go out and audit suppliers all the time as a QP. And often the commercial agreements are already much too far progressed before you're making the decision whether they're actually the right partner to work with from a compliance perspective. I know one of my colleagues went up to, where were they? Now, I probably shouldn't say the country because there's not very many of them that supply from that country. But anyway, they got there and they found that the change parts were stored outside, which, on a nice day, not so bad, but they were stored outside in the mud. Not quite what you expect for an API manufacturer. Patient safety must be the ultimate measure of success. Patient safety includes not just making harm, not just avoiding harm, but also making them better. So, time, cost, and spec. The principles work well across many industries, but in pharma you have to add compliance. You always have to make sure that success includes meeting the regulatory expectations. I remember at Novartis, when I first started, they were so far behind I couldn't believe. The site's closed now. But I was involved in bringing them up to spec, bringing them into compliance, including training across sites, not just at the site I was based at. It was interesting there because I learned more about what was relevant from their perspective to what I was doing as well. So operations and regulatory working closely together. It was actually a really successful project. Reality in pharmaceuticals, GMP is not an option. Your documentation has to be anticipated up front. You've got to write it down. As they say, if it's not written down, it's a rumour. And if it's not signed and dated, it's graffiti. I quite like that one. Patient safety. Patient safety overrides everything. Whatever you think you might be able to do. If it's not safe for the patient, then don't bother. As a QP, that's my primary focus. And in pharmaceutical manufacturing, you need a QP to sign off. You can't just get, I think many people would like AI to sign it off these days, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. On time can impact compliance. I can tell you about a project. Was it ERP or was it EQMS? ERP system implementation. It was SAP. And the actual project was getting compressed because unfortunately we had a lot of scope creep. And if you don't know what that means, well, you start with your original specification, and as more and more people understand what the system can actually deliver, they add extra requirements. So rather than just starting with the user requirements spec at the beginning and delivering that, you end up delivering more and more and more. Unfortunately, when you're in the position of having a specific go-live date because you've got an extended weekend with a bank holiday before and after, which is August, basically. Not August, it's April. April in the UK. Most of the time, well, sometimes varies. It's Easter, so it's sometimes March. Anyway, the Easter bank holiday is often the target for a launch. People rarely want to do it at Christmas when you have an even longer downtime because there's always a rush afterwards. So we were planned for Easter, and they've been pushing and pushing and adding more and adding more. And we came to doing the validation. They said, yeah, everything's fine. We've done all the tests. The qualification works. Factory-based at their end. And then I said, right, let's follow through the process. I said, yeah, look, this. And I said, what about the feedback loop? What about the when it fails? Go around the circle. And unfortunately, all the test is what I call the happy path. When everything goes right, start to finish, everything was fine. As soon as something didn't go right, though, they had the coding wrong. There was nowhere to add the extra data. There was nowhere to save and retain the original in the assigned space on the drive. So it failed every single time. So it took us another 6 months of them coding and us verifying on an ongoing basis so that they actually did it right. Before we went live. 6 months delay, imagine that. Now, if we'd looked at the spec and if they'd understood what was expected from a compliance perspective, because they had the scripts ready there that we were going to go through, but they shortened the timing. They shortened the actual amount of work that they put in. They didn't complete the documentation that should have been completed. They didn't allow us the review time that we should have had ongoing. Testing should have been ongoing throughout. And the compressed schedule resulted in us failing to deliver on time. On budget, often costs more. If you reduce the involvement of quality oversight, quality assurance, all those planned and systematic activities that go into your project to make sure it's going to work, poor design decisions can then result in expensive rework and failure to deliver on time. Now, that project that I was talking about was going to give us a massive cost saving. Instead, that year, it was a massive over expenditure. Fortunately, it didn't affect the product because we could roll it back. But inadequate commissioning also delays qualification. And they were doing the commissioning at source, making sure it worked before it came to us. It didn't work when it was commissioned on site. Supplier oversight. Supplier oversight is an interesting one. So I know a lot of people that will do a risk assessment. They'll do their questionnaire and they'll get a copy of the license and they'll say, yeah, it's been audited. It's been audited by X regulatory authority, and I'm not going to cast aspersions on any particular one. But then when you go and look and you see what they're doing, and you notice they've got no pest control at the entrances, and you see that the temperature is monitored, they're not controlled in the laboratory, and you see that the warehouse doesn't have any humidity control whatsoever, and then you look up and you see those skylights, and you look around and you think, well, how are they actually going to maintain compliance when it's bad weather if they've got no protection at the doors? Then you know that that license wasn't enough to assure the quality of your product. And when it comes in, you're going to look for the rejects. Unfortunately, you're much better off going out to have a look. And because you won't make the mistake of choosing a supplier that's got substandard performance before you even start. Prevention is always better than remediation. I've been working with a supplier, not in this country, another country, and they consistently fail to retain the staff. again and again and again, they keep losing their staff. And unfortunately, they're the operational staff, the ones that are involved in day-to-day processing of returns, processing of picking, processing of the confirmation that everything's been documented correctly. And in the absence of the second check that's normal for a GMP or GDP environment, they just consistently fail. They're delivering the stock, but it's already failed spec because it's already out of temperature. On spec doesn't always mean fit for purpose. When you define your specification, you have to make sure that you've got the qualification right, that you've got the validation right, that the acceptance criteria actually meets the requirements to satisfy not just the engineers, but also GMP. The user requirement spec has to include the operational requirements. And you need systems to support the intended manufacturing process. Otherwise, what are you going to do? Guess? Work to the manufacturer's operation manual? But it didn't take your product into account. Life cycle performance matters more than just installation success. You want something that's going to be there for the future, not just for today. You want it tomorrow, the next day, delivering your product to your market, to your customer, to your patient, on time, to the right specification, so that they actually get better. The health improves. Qualification confirms suitability, not just simply functionality, but you need to follow the whole program, the life cycle of the product. You need to verify on an ongoing basis that you're actually delivering the product the way it's supposed to be. It's got to be fit for its intended purpose. There are a few constraints, project constraints, that projects often ignore. Data integrity. Data integrity is one that's rarely considered other than by auditors from the outset. Now, of course, you have a lot of auditors on site, people that are doing the self-inspections, people that are external, that are coming in to look at what you're doing. Inspectors are coming in. But people don't always listen. They think, well, this is the project, this is what we've got to get done in this time period. We'll fix that later. But then when the data integrity fails and you're not allowed in market, as has been the case recently, the FDA has been over to a number of unannounced inspections in various different continents and found issues that result in the product from that particular site being on notification of not being allowed on site into the US. Then we have qualification and validation. You can't treat it as something that's got to be done afterwards. You need to make sure that you actually consider it before it leaves the supplier. Does the functional spec meet our user requirement spec? Functional spec from the supplier is what they can actually deliver. If it's not the same as what you need, then you're going to fail because your acceptance criteria is already not met before it even sets off. Then throughout the life cycle, you have to make sure you've got change management in control. Absolutely in control. I remember a change to a raw material, which actually impacted the product. The tablets actually fell apart. But fortunately, we'd used change management to test it, to put it through the machine before it actually went live. But it's not the only case. HVAC system with a like-for-like change, that wasn't. It was the same reference number, the same name in the catalogue, but it wasn't the same part. It had been manufactured 9 years earlier, this product, this HVAC system. And I thought, well, let's go through full change control and check the specification, not just the reference number. And it took them 3 months to install one board, because it wasn't one board. They changed the whole unit because it was updated. It was out of date. Operator competency is something that can be difficult with a new piece of machinery. or a new product or a new launch. But it's essential. Training and inspection readiness has to be considered right from the beginning. Lifecycle management, you want it. You want your product to be there for the long term, built into the design. You don't just want to launch for day one and get your bonus. You want to keep it on the market, don't you? So we need to make sure we deliver compliantly, sustainably, with operational readiness, safely, including the life cycle documents to protect the patient. So what do we do to build cross-functional project success? Well, in engineering, design compliant systems from the outset. Ensure you use the right materials for a start. If you're not using that stainless steel, it's going to rust. It won't last very long because we're going to use harsh chemicals to keep it clean. Quality assurance provides governance and oversight throughout the project, including preempting what might go wrong with your risk assessment. Validation confirms fitness for intended use. It's not just the spec. It's not just acceptance criteria. It's meeting the requirements of the patient. Manufacturing, regulatory, operational practicality, and future licensing readiness. What's coming next? What's on the horizon? And leadership aligns quality, compliance, cost, and operational objectives. Success is a shared outcome. It's not just for one function. If you try and deliver it on your own, then something's going to get missed. Success doesn't end at project handover. The most successful pharmaceutical project isn't the one that's first, it's the one delivering safe, compliant medicines in the future. Maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 100. But it's way into the future, not just today. So I'd like to invite you to join me in booking a workshop or some training at the Academy of Pharmaceutical Excellence. If you're interested in finding out more, please do contact me at linkedin.com/int/Paul-Palmer. You can see the link on the screen. Maybe you're already watching me on LinkedIn, and then just send me a message. If you're in the pharmaceutical field, do contact me. Then, of course, we have YouTube, where I share a lot of free training. But, of course, you don't get the personal interaction. That might be what you want. Start with the freebies. Start with an understanding of the industry if you're not in it yet. There's a lot there for you to understand. I hope you found this useful. I do appreciate feedback. And if you've got a recommendation, if you'd like to make a recommendation on LinkedIn, please do go ahead, especially if you find my content beneficial. Okay. Thank you for watching. I do hope you found it useful. Now, I do like to leave this for another 30 seconds at the end, because sometimes the video gets cut off at the wrong point. So I'm just going to talk for a few more seconds about what we do. We offer audit services for your suppliers. We offer training for you and your team. We offer support for rectification of adverse inspection findings from regulators. But also we'll help you set up there in the first place so you don't get up to those regulatory adverse findings in the first place. We can help you set up your site new, even help you identify the right one that's specific to your particular requirements. Using, of course, the user requirement spec, which it always amuses me when people say, oh, we don't have a user requirement spec. And they go to a supplier and actually ask them to write it for them. But then all you get is their interpretation of the functional spec, which they're always going to meet. You need to be the one defining what's required. And now, well, I can always help you do that if you're not sure what should be in there. Or one of my team. Okay, so that's it for me for today. I hope you found it useful, and I hope to hear from you soon.